Welcome back to another Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. I see nobody's lining up to listen today, but that's okay. It's Friday. I hope you've all had a good week. The House, of course, hasn't been sitting, so we haven't had our daily tete-a-tete with question period. I've kind of missed it, to tell you the truth. But when I come back in a moment or two, we're going to talk about the new plastics registry. Yes, believe it or not. So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need to resolve to resist. Okay, I've got to be quite serious about something here at the beginning. We are losing subscribers. Yes, we were over 22,000. YouTube decided to excise some of our subscribers. So please, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Resubscribe if you need to. This is just such BS, but it happens to the biggest stations. And they seem to really go after stations that want to talk about policies and not just personalities. Because you'll notice every thumbnail I put up is not a picture of Trudeau crying or Trudeau being oppressed or the usual stuff. I try to talk about policy here and how we can counter Trudeau's policies, not just his personality. Yes, we know he is an unalloyed narcissist. We know he calls everybody names. His policies are killing Canada. And we're going to talk today about a new policy that came out this week. But please ring the bell, like the station now at the offset so we can beat YouTube's suppression as much as we're trying to beat Justin Trudeau's censorship. Because, yeah, he is trying to censor this station. There's no question about it. Before I forget, we've already had orders, but the stickers are great. We really, really like the stickers. Please get your order in for the stickers at the store, the KRAYDEN'S Right store. You can read more about that in the description. And we've got these great coffee mugs. Yeah, you can see the resolve to resist on both sides. I've got one with me here. And I haven't got a picture of the magnet, but I'll show you. Yeah, this is great for your fridge. When you wake up in the morning, it reminds you to stand on guard for Canadian freedom. Or put it on your filing cabinet at home or at work. I think it's quite handy for that too. So those are available in the store, and I encourage you to have a look at those. So we're going to be talking about this plastics registry. You're saying plastics registry? Yes, while the House wasn't sitting this week, guess who was really busy behind the scenes and once or twice in front of the cameras? But our favorite environment and climate change minister, Steven Guilbeault. You remember Steven Guilbeault. Of course, who can forget? Steven Guilbeault is legendary. It's just absolutely legendary.
I'm a liberal and a proud socialist, Mr. Speaker.
He's a liberal and a proud socialist. Apparently, that's the same thing these days. He used to be quite different. And my old friend from the old Liberal Party, you hear things from former MPs that are quite interesting. But he is not popular with a lot of former Liberal MPs who think he really is not just a proud socialist, but perhaps a Marxist. And I think that's something we really have to consider with Guilbeault. Because look at this old clip here. I love this. This is pure Guilbeault from his days as a Greenpeace activist.
Climbing the world's tallest building today to tell the world not to be fooled by the Liberal government. As the talk on climate change starts, we want to tell the world that the Bush and Canadian administration are out to kill the Kyoto Protocol.
So there he is in 2001, that's 23 years ago, when he said, watch out for the Liberals because they're not serious about the environment. Well, I'm afraid he couldn't say that today because he's now the minister in this cabinet. Trudeau handpicked this goof, this clown, this buffoon, who used to be a stunt man for Greenpeace by climbing buildings like the CN Tower and making an ass and fool of himself for environmental extremism. He's now in charge. The inmates are in charge of the asylum now. That's what's happened with people like Guilbeault in cabinet. So he has now decided that we're going to have a plastics registry. You all remember the long gun registry? Well, now we're going to have a plastics registry, and this is going to make it incumbent upon industries, companies, including farmers, to account for all of the plastics that they produce and use, to make sure they have a record of it all and how they have disposed of them. Now, this is going to create an incredible administrative burden for Canadian businesses. So instead of creating new products, instead of having a period of innovation, instead of investing in things like resources, instead of investing in development, they're going to be administratively hamstrung by this plastics registry. And here's the kicker. We aren't dealing with plastics right now in any way that is adequate. I'm going to explain that in a minute. But just a few more comments about Guilbeault. It was often said about the great jazz trumpeter, Chet Baker, that he was either a brilliant trumpeter with a heroin addiction, or he was a heroin addict who could play the trumpet extremely well. And it was difficult to say which. Well, something similar could be said about Steven Guilbeault. He's either an environmental extremist activist who's pretending to be a cabinet minister, or he's a cabinet minister who really wants to be an environmental extremist. So it's difficult to know what is motivating him more. But I would say it's the activism, the extremism. He wants to change Canada beyond recognition. He wants to destroy the Canadian economy. He wants to bring it back to the Stone Age. And it's interesting how the Liberals are accusing the Conservatives of wanting to bring Canada back to the Stone Age. For what reason? I'm not sure. Somehow, if you don't sign on the bottom line for the carbon tax, you want to bring Canada back to the Stone Age. And that is extremely curious because, of course, people who believe that climate change is entirely man-made, anthropocentric, they are the ones bringing Canada back to the Stone Age because they really believe we should be living in caves and eschewing all forms of traditional energy, all fossil fuels, not heating our homes, not air conditioning it in the summer, not driving vehicles, cars or trucks or anything like that, not flying an aircraft, and somehow relying on green energy like solar panels and windmills to produce sufficient energy. Now, anybody with half a brain, anyone with two wits to rub together can tell you that the green energy available to us today is not sufficient to, in any way, power a modern economy. I want to say that again. It's not sufficient to power a modern economy. There's not enough there. We still need fossil fuels. And if they take it away from us, we're going to freeze and we're going to starve and we're going to be in financial disaster because we can't work the economy without it. This is quite clear. So what is this registry going to do? Well, I'm going to get into why it's a farce and why it's an absolute sham, because the entire recycling program is a sham. And this is hard to take. I'm not saying recycling is a bad idea. I'm saying the way it's set up in Canada and the United States is a sham because it's not do what it says it's doing. But first of all, let's look at this plastics registry and see why it's going to be a disaster.
Why we're all gathered here today. As we begin our work for INC4, the oceans and land we're committed to protect are choking with plastic. We produce, buy, use, and throw away plastic irresponsibly and unsustainably. Plastic pollution is found in every corner of our planet. We are breathing, drinking, and eating it. We know there is another way. Tackling this global crisis requires a renewed sense of commitment and a stronger partnerships between us all. It calls for new, ambitious action to stop global plastic production and waste from tripling by 2060. Let me share 3 reflections with you. First, success for me is adopting a global deal that speaks to people's needs and aspirations. Over the past 30 years, I have participated in the adoption of groundbreaking and historic international agreements. Yes, multilateralism can sometimes seem long and tedious, but it works when everyone feels represented. That's what we did when we adopted the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and months later, the High Seas Treaty, or BBNJ, and the UAE Consensus at COP28 last year. This plastic crisis, just like climate change and loss of biodiversity, affects each community differently, and developing nations, indigenous peoples, and marginalized communities often bear disproportionate impacts.
Well, we didn't listen to all of his dissertation. It's a bit too much to take. So this is going to, as I said, create an administrative burden on industry, companies, business, farmers, everybody who's going to now have to keep track of all of their plastics. And you say, well, that's not a bad thing if it leads to recycling. But I've got 2 points to make about this. First of all, the recycling is not happening. And this is a shock to most people. Because I will say this, as a small C conservative libertarian, I don't see any difficulty. I have no difficulty, and I see no distinct problem with recycling. Because it's a rational idea, reusing material that otherwise would just fill landfills, would fill dumps. Because obviously we can't continue to put this stuff in dumps forever. It's nice to be able to reuse it so it doesn't go in the ocean, so it doesn't kill fish and water life. And of course, that is the difference between idiots who are obsessed with climate change and real environmentalists who are really concerned about pollution, real pollution, not carbon, which is not a pollution, but real pollution that kills fish, birds, and wildlife, as well as human beings. Real pollution. That's a good thing to reduce and eradicate. But the nonsense about greenhouse gas emissions, the nonsense about climate change being an existential threat, that is a faux environmental concern. It's phony. But that's what Guilbeault wants you to think about and worry about. Now, the problem here is that we're not recycling our plastics. I want to want you to watch a bit of this video here. And this is a shocker for people who are not up on this. We are not recycling. We are not recycling the plastics at all. We think we are. And Guilbeault knows we're not recycling the plastics. And I'll have more to say about how bad the situation is after we watch this video.
When you recycle your plastics, it makes you feel good. But did you know that many waste collectors actually see recycling goods like commodities and buy or sell them to brokers? Oftentimes, these brokers send the plastic trash to poorer countries overseas, where they end up in landfills, open dumps, or in nature. The problem is, if you want transparency on what really happened to your plastic trash after you throw it in the recycling bin, most likely you're going to hit a wall. Today, we're looking at the ugly truth behind recycling, why recycling is a hoax and a sham. In 1950, the entire world as a whole produced 2 million tons of plastic. Fast forward 65 years, and the world's plastic production jumped 190 times. We're talking about 381 million tons made in 2015. Even worse, cumulatively, we made 7.8 billion tons total during those 65 years. When it comes to managing plastic waste, there are two main ways to deal with it. You can either manage it domestically or export it. Not many Americans know this, but since the 1990s, America's popular choice has been to export it. And actually, exporting plastic waste is rather routine now. Problem is, when you export it, you can't guarantee that the plastic will be treated and recycled for the better good of mankind. Most likely, the truth is, it's not really being recycled, but just dumped in poorer countries. It's like you taking your household trash out every few days, but dumping it in your neighbor's yard when they're not looking. So next time you put something in a recycling bin, it'll make you wonder if you're really helping the planet. Back in 2018, residents and city officials in Palo Alto, California, decided to look into where their recycling was going. Now, most of us average Americans may think the answer is simple, and you can trace it, but actually it's anything but. It all started in 2019 when news started circulating about plastic dumping in Bali, Indonesia. You see, Bali has been a major tourist attraction in Southeast Asia for decades, and a big reason for that comes down to the pristine nature and waters around the land. But nowadays, when the sun shines down on the waters surrounding Bali, not uncommon to see reflections from plastic waste floating in the water. In fact, plastic waste got so bad that its governor, Y.N. Coster, announced that a ban on single-use plastic bags, straws, and styrofoam would start. This was in late 2018, not long after a viral video that showed a diver swimming through large swaths of plastic debris off Bali's coast. Some say that Bali is in a state of waste emergency. When news about this reached the States, many residents of California heard about it. For example, citizens in Palo Alto got curious about their own city's waste management. They wanted to know if Palo Alto was sending its plastic waste to Southeast Asian countries like Bali. But honestly, even up today, there still is no definitive answer. The best the city was able to find was that about 40% of its recyclable waste stays in North America and gets processed according to strict environmental and labor standards. But the sad thing is, the other 60% gets shipped away mainly to Asia. Even sadder is, it's unclear how much of that even gets recycled, if at all.
Okay, 60% of this recyclable waste is not going to recycling centers to be reused, replaced. It's being sent overseas, and it's littering the third world. Now, it's worse. I've got worse news for you. It's even worse than this. There was a fifth estate investigation that barely scratched the veneer of Canada's sham commitment to recycling. And this is from a column I wrote this morning for the Epoch Times, which will be running probably tomorrow. But here's a sneak preview of that column. Now, this investigation from the CBC now. This is CBC, mainstream media. This is not some far right. This is not far right media agency. This is not even new or independent media. This is legacy media reporting this now. It discovered that at least 123 shipping containers were sent back to Canada in a 5-year period after Canadian recycling companies were found to be in contravention of numerous violations of international waste export regulations. 123 containers, many of them going to the Philippines, shipped back to Canada because it was illegal. These companies had the full approval of the Trudeau government to send illegal, unsorted household waste to these third world countries where they hoped it wouldn't be found, noted, or seen. But Guilbeault won't tell you who these companies are, and he was asked, probably because he knows they have signed clandestine agreements with the federal government to ensure that they can't be prosecuted or punished for their actions. We can't make those names public, Guilbeault told the Fifth Estate. Holy crap. So here's Guilbeault. No. I can't tell you who those companies are because we've okayed it. The Environment Ministry has okayed this. The Trudeau government says okay. Steven Guilbeault says that's all right. Now that's a shocker. That is an absolute shocker. So, as I go on in my columns, is a global plastic ban a solution then? Is that what this is leading up to? Because recycling's not working. Guilbeault won't admit that because his registry is still going to rely on recycling. Companies are supposed to recycle the plastic and report it recycled, except it's going to the third world. It's going overseas. Only 40% of it's being recycled. But they're just going to say, yeah, we shipped it off for recycling. No problem. But no, a global plastic ban by, what are they saying, 2060? No, it's not a solution. This is more environmental showmanship. And as much as I hate to say it, I hate to use the cliche, it's just virtue signaling. And just as green energy supplied by solar panels and windmills cannot be expected by any rational person to power a modern industrial society, and just as electric vehicles are dependent upon fossil fuels for recharging, so there is no feasible way to eliminate all plastics in 15 years without endangering the health and safety of individuals and the hygienic integrity of a myriad of consumer products, including food. So we've come a long way from the initial Trudeau government policy on plastics. You all remember what that was? Let's have a look.
We have recently switched to drinking water bottles out of when we have water bottles out of a plastic, away from plastic towards paper, like drink box water bottles sort of things.
Yeah. Folks, that was Trudeau's initial plastics policy. It was get rid of those plastic bottles in your cupboard, in your fridge, and get those little cardboard drink boxes. And he was unable to articulate that in a fashion that was even vaguely understandable or comprehensible. But that's Justin Trudeau without a script. He's an actor. He's not an actor who was ever incapable of improvisation, obviously. He needed the script in front of him. I'm not even sure he could memorize the lines, but he needed that script in front of him, and he didn't have it during that news conference. That was from 2019, by the way. So that's the old Liberal plastics policy. The new Liberal plastics policy is, first of all, we're going to have a registry. We're going to make life miserable for everybody who uses plastics, even though, mind you, the single-use plastics policy of this Trudeau government was ruled unconstitutional by a federal court. They want to eliminate single-use plastics in grocery stores, which of course is insane. So you're going to be buying stale vegetables, fruit, and meat, or meat that's gone bad, or you're going to be buying meat from foreign countries or vegetables from foreign countries or fruit from foreign countries that can wrap it in plastic because they're not subject to the same Canadian laws. But that was struck down because it's insane. But they're going to keep trying. They're appealing that decision, and they're trying to go through the United Nations, of course, to give us a global policy. Now, the other part of the Trudeau plastics policy today is a global ban, which I said is not going to happen. This is the equivalent of banning the combustion engine, banning the gas-powered engine by 2035. That's not going to happen either, because electric vehicles cannot fill the void. There's nothing else to replace the gas-powered car or the gas-powered aircraft. This is not going to happen. It's nothing short of insane virtue signaling. And as I say, it's environmental showmanship. It's an environmental act. It's theater. That's all it is. So no, don't expect the Liberal plastics policy to actually move forward. And thank God this government will not last past October 2025. Thanks for watching today, folks. That's an update on plastics. That's what your politicians have been up to this week when they haven't been in question period. Or at least Steven Guilbeault. Have a great weekend, but I will be back tomorrow with more information that you need to know. Thank you for watching this episode of Stand on Guard and being a part of the KRAYDEN'S Right channel. If you've watched this episode to this point, you've watched it all. And that's really important for a small station like this. We always say subscribe, hit the bell, be a part of the KRAYDEN resistance. Resolve to resist. That's what we're doing. And if you become a subscriber, if you're a supporter of this station or a member through Substack, through YouTube, and now you can be a local as well, that's so important to us because I couldn't do this without you. I made a decision to become an independent journalist about a year ago because I wanted to bring all of my experience in the military, in journalism, to you. I don't promise anything I can't deliver. I don't offer clickbait. I offer truth. The truth is out there, and it's my job to bring that truth to light and to you. Thanks for being a part of the KRAYDEN'S Right resistance, and we'll see you again soon. So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need a political change, but we also need to resolve to resist